Hey there, folks. Happy Tuesday. I was about to say Wednesday because it's usually Wednesday when we come together for these health writing related conversations. But I thought I would do a little series over the next couple of weeks. So you will be seeing me a little more often throughout the week than just our typical Wednesday chats. Um, I am having some weird internet things going on, so if for some reason I cut out or you can't hear me, just let me know in the comments and I'll try to see if I can work on that. But I hope you're doing well and thank you for being here, whether you are catching this live or whether you are watching this on the replay. So, as you probably guessed or read based on the title of today's conversation, I am going to be talking to you about an experience that I have not shared very often, more than one time, to be completely honest. And when I shared it that one time, which was a couple of years ago, it was kind of crazy because I almost forgot that it happened. It's just not something that I think about very often. And it was kind of a similar experience when I thought of it again recently. The fact that back in 2017, it was really the end of 2017 going into 2018, making the decision to drop out or not continue a graduate program that I was enrolled in at the time. And the reason that I thought it would be helpful to talk to you all about that experience is because even though it isn't something that I actively think about all the time, when I do reflect back on that experience, I realize that it has a lot to do with with my freelance health content writing career and with my decision to kind of go in that direction and flesh out that freelancing into a business, etc. So it was a really poignant experience in that regard. And so I kind of wanted to share what went into making that decision, some lessons that I took away that even if you're not in that exact same position, may be helpful for you if you are an aspiring health writer who kind of has to make some similar risk versus benefit analysis and some similar difficult decisions, even if not the same. So for those who don't know, who maybe we haven't had the chance to connect or meet, my name is Megan Freeland. I am a public health pharmacist turned health content strategist. I am the founder of Stock Rose Creative, which is a health content marketing company. And I also created the Health Professionals to Health Writers program, which teaches pharmacists how to replace a portion of their pharmacist income through freelance health content writing. And so really happy to have you here in case you haven't been here before. Again, we usually do these videos on Wednesdays, but we'll be doing a few more every week for the next couple of weeks or so. So let's go ahead and jump into the story time. If you have any questions or comments, whether you're watching live or on the replay, feel free to drop them here. I'll see them later, or you can always shoot me a DM. I love having conversations in DMs as well. So what happened? I should preface this by saying many of you know that it was my dream for a long time to become a public health pharmacist. When I went into pharmacy, i.e., when I decided to go to pharmacy school, it was not with the intention of practicing pharmacy in the traditional sense. My goal specifically was to learn about drugs, and pharmacy school was the only way that I knew how to learn about drugs, but to take that knowledge and apply it to a public health setting in some way. So I went into pharmacy school knowing that I wanted to be a public health pharmacist on the other side, even though I didn't have a very clear image of what a public health pharmacist looked like. It was kind of a blurry vision that I had in my mind. So one of the things that I struggled with through pharmacy school was, okay, I know that there are not a lot of pharmacists in public health. So how do I make sure that I'm getting the experiences, the exposure, the legitimacy? How am I building my legitimacy as a candidate to work in public health spaces when I graduate? And so one of the things that I always had a little bit of self-doubt about was the fact that I was not enrolled in a public health program, in a degree program. And there were a couple of reasons for that. One, a pharmacy school cost enough money. I was not trying to take out any more loans to finance another degree on top of what I was already doing for pharmacy school. The pharmacy school that I was at, I think while I was enrolled, they they may have either started the public health program or maybe they started the dual degree option, the PharmD MPH. But at the time, the MPH was purely like a generalist degree. They didn't have specialization opportunities. And I wanted, if I got the degree, I wanted to be able to specialize. So due to a couple of reasons, and also time, like I had to work during pharmacy school, so I just didn't feel like I had the time to do all of those things. So because of all of those things, I chose not to pursue an MPH while I was in school, even though I really, really wanted to. I did a lot of like extracurricular things, internships, fellowships, all that kind of stuff to build my uh, network in public health and to try to increase my exposure to public health opportunities. So around 2017, right, I had graduated. I was about 2 years out of pharmacy school, about 1 year almost out of my postgraduate fellowship. And I was finally in a place where one, I could pay for grad school out of pocket. I had enrolled in the University of South Florida's online MPH program. I could afford to pay it out of pocket because if you remember, one of my things was like, I'm not taking out loans for this. And I had some time to work on it. Now, at the time, I did have a full-time job and my son was 1 year old. So I was just kind of coming out of that first year of new motherhood and feeling like, all right, I got a little space to breathe. I think that if there's ever going to be, it's not that this is a great time, but if there's ever going to be a time, I need to do it now. I need to go ahead and start now. So I had the money and I thought I had the time and I made that decision to go ahead and, do the application process. I got accepted and I enrolled. And around that same time, earlier that year, I had also stumbled upon freelance writing. Again, for those who know the story, you know that I had started a blog just for as a creative outlet for myself. And a company discovered that health blog and asked me if I would be willing to write for them. So that was my like accidental foray into freelance writing because I didn't even know it was a thing prior to then. So earlier that year, I had kind of stumbled along that path and I realized that, oh, if this company needs this service, then there must be other health companies that need it as well. So those two things were kind of happening at the same time. I had started writing health content for different companies and I had decided, oh, this would be a great time to go to grad school. In retrospect, as I'm saying this out loud, it doesn't sound like a good idea. Like, I don't know, I don't know how many clients I had at the time when I decided to apply to and start grad school. Like, I wish I could remember exactly how those two things lined up, but I thought that time wasn't an issue and time was very much an issue. And the reason it became an issue was because as I started realizing the opportunity that was there with freelance health content writing, and as I started realizing that, my desire to grow this thing, to write for more companies might be increasing because I'm realizing what that opportunity really is and that there's so much more for me to do out there. I was also struggling with what does that mean for this graduate program that I've enrolled in that I've wanted to do for so long. And it became a realization of there's no way in hell I can split my time between these two things. My time, while I have it, is already very limited, and my brain is very stretched. I'm a new mom. I still have mom brain. Like even though my son is 1 year old at the time, I'm working a full-time job that isn't my favorite in the world, that I also don't have like a deep background in. So I'm having to learn a lot for my full-time job. It's just a lot going on, and I can't do both of these things well. So it became a question of, or a matter of having to choose, having to pick. And it felt like I was choosing between um, a long time dream and my future potential. And I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that. Like, if you have, drop a comment and say me. But that was a really tough decision because you're kind of thinking about all this emotional attachment that you have to this idea because you've had that idea for so long, you've had that goal for so long, but you're also realizing that there might be potential in another direction. And you know that you can't do both really well, and so you have to pick. So this was a part of my challenge, like deciding whether that long time dream was still relevant and rethinking what the path towards that would look like. So what that meant specifically in this situation is, as I mentioned, my long time goal was to become a public health pharmacist. So I had to take an objective look at my resources, right? Um, Rather than operating out of fear or operating out of scarcity, I had to like realistically look at my situation and say, okay, what do I have and what do I need? Well, first, what is my goal? What do I have already and what do I need more of to reach that goal? Well, it turned out, okay, my goal, right, being a public health pharmacist. And why is that my goal? Because I want to have a broader impact on health and on people and their health than I felt like I would in a more direct patient care role. And in looking at what I already had a lot of things that gave me the authority to be in public health spaces and to work in public health spaces. At this time, my full time job was at the CDC, and this was my third role at the CDC in some type of capacity. I had, because of those roles and opportunities, I had a really strong network in public health because most of my extracurricular activities that I did throughout school, the people that I met at different conferences and whatnot, like I had those relationships and they were strong. So I had the network, right? I had the work experience because I had been working in public health on several occasions. So I had years of experience. And I had moved with those CDC roles. The first was a summer fellowship, like a summer student fellowship. The next one was, what was the next one? The next one was like it's a next level fellowship where I wasn't a student anymore. It was kind of a next level fellowship. And then that third role was as a full-time contractor. So I was like moving up the chain. And I had to remind myself that I did all of these things without that MPH. I never had a public health degree. I never got that. Yet I was still able to to create and curate the strong network within public health. And I was still able to up level the opportunities, the career opportunities that I was getting in that space. So I had to realistically look and say, okay, do I feel like I need this MPH to do what I'm doing right now? Or do I feel like I need this MPH if I want to move up? And it was the latter. I felt like if I wanted to move up, if I wanted to progress, that I needed the MPH. But the question became, do I want to move up or do I want to take a different route? And that different route being this new potential opportunity that I was seeing in freelance health content writing. Um, the next challenge that kind of goes along with this is that I had to accept that sometimes, even though the overall goal, the overall dream stays the same, um, that the way to get there changes. So it was still my overarching goal to build a career in which I felt like I was impacting the public health landscape on a broader scale than I could through direct patient care. That was still and is still an overarching goal. But what I realized was that I don't have to be a public health pharmacist or work as a public health pharmacist in order to achieve that. I can use freelance health content writing to achieve that goal because I'm still using my skill, my background, my knowledge, my writing to impact public health on a wider scale. I'm creating content for companies who have large audiences, and those audiences are seeking health information. And when they find the content that I'm creating or that I'm helping to create, that is my impact on public health on a broad level. So I had to accept that in some ways the dream evolves. That overarching dream can stay the same, that overarching goal can remain the same, but the way that I'm getting there, that can change and that can evolve with me. Um, and then the last challenge I think in that situation was having the courage to trust myself and to trust this path that was kind of rerouting me. Um, I think about it kind of like a GPS. I learned a long time ago to just do what the GPS says, right? Sometimes I don't know why the GPS is telling me to go all the way around. I live in Metro Atlanta, so like I'm in traffic all the time. I've lived here for 14, how long has it been? Since 2007. I've been here a long time. And Atlanta is a city where you still use your GPS to get around purely because of traffic. Even if you know where you're going, you want to put that address in the GPS so you don't run into like random traffic. But sometimes the GPS will tell you to go a different way, a way that is like kind of roundabout or like something that you wouldn't have thought of. And maybe it's because there's an accident on the highway or there is construction going on the highway and you don't necessarily know that. Your end destination doesn't change, but the path that you take to get to that end destination might change. So the same way that I have courage and the same way that I have faith in my GPS when it's sending me along a different path, I also had to decide to have faith in this new path that I was seeing, for myself and for my career, and trust that that reroute would still cause me to reach my goal and my destination, but to accept that that might look different and to have the courage to still pursue that, even though I knew that it would look different than I had always thought it would. So, um, with all of that said, a couple of lessons learned that I think will be helpful for anyone who's watching who might find themselves in a similar situation. And by a similar situation, I don't mean like you just happen to be in graduate school and you're wondering whether you want to keep going, but I mean any situation there where you feel like you are being maybe nudged in a different direction or pushed in a different direction or realizing that different opportunities exist and are available to you, especially for those of you who are pharmacists who um, are might be looking into different types of opportunities or different directions that you can take your career in. A couple of lessons learned: the path forward might not be what you expected. Be open to that. um, you never know where that path is going to lead you, but be open to exploring different paths because I think that's how we grow and that's how we progress and kind of fall into into our purposes or into our destinies, if you will. The second lesson learned is that the path forward will likely require sacrifices and to be prepared for that. So the sacrifices that I faced in this experience in particular, some that come to mind. One, that whole semester of grad school that I paid for, I don't remember how much it was, but let's say around $5,000. Like that was gone. Like I did a semester, that's it. I chose not to go back. That 5K, it's a wash. That was a sacrifice that I made. That was me saying, okay, I don't feel obligated to stay here just because I've invested that money. I invested that money. I learned something. I learned a lesson, right? And so sometimes we're learning lessons, and it kind of makes that investment worth it in a way. Other sacrifices that I made, that path, right? That whole vision for what I thought my career was going to look like in public health, kind of moving up the ladder at the CDC, that wasn't my goal anymore. That wasn't my dream anymore. So in a way, I sacrificed that in order to pursue a different goal and a different dream. And then the last takeaway or lesson learned is the path forward might not be entirely clear, and be accepting of that. So I didn't necessarily know like what the end goal would look like. I'm still working toward the end goal. This is something that's in progress. And I mean, honestly, even if I'm thinking about my goal of being a public health pharmacist, that wasn't something that was clear at all because I didn't know any public health pharmacists. Like that was a path that I had to design for myself. Because as you know, most of the paths that are taught or given to you in the pharmacy school setting is kind of like you're going down the retail side or the community side, or you're going down the hospital residency side. And if you're not doing that, then you kind of got to figure out that path on your own. And so even in that situation, the path forward was not clear. And it definitely wasn't clear when I moved to the side of freelance health content writing, which is part of the reason why I created the Health Professionals to Health Writers program, because I want more pharmacists and healthcare providers to be in the position of creating health content for the general public. But the path forward it's incredibly unclear if you're trying to figure that out on your own. And I know that firsthand because I did try to figure that out on my own. So Shelly said, thank you so much for sharing. This is her comment here. Yeah, and you're not even done. And that's the thing. Like, I think that the path is constantly evolving and it's constantly shifting, and we have to be open to the fact that that's going to happen. We have to be accepting of it, even if we're not comfortable with it, because on the other side of that, at least in my experience, on the other side of that, there's always growth and there's always more clarity and more understanding than you might have had before. So even though the lessons might be hard earned and hard learned, I think that in a lot of cases, they're really worth it. So in terms of how this applies to you in your life, I think that, think about what your expectation of your professional contribution to the world looks like. Like, what are the things that, what are the reasons that you got into pharmacy? Or if you're a different type of healthcare provider, that you got into your particular field? What are those things? And what is your expectation of how you will impact your profession and the people that you work with through your profession? Think about that. Think about whether your current role is actually supporting that expectation and supporting that vision. We're still going to have our Wednesday video tomorrow, and we're going to talk about why your 6-figure pharmacist salary is not worth your sanity, right? And so this is thinking about like the current role that you're in. How does that support the expectation that you have of your professional contribution? And if it doesn't support that, what are things that you can do to increase that level of support? If those two things don't match up, I think this is a great time to figure out how to reroute, right? Like that word we talked about earlier, rerouting. Maybe that overarching goal is the same, but the way that you get there is different. So remember that rerouting is going to take courage, it's going to take sacrifices. It might not be entirely clear, but that's something that you have to take ownership of and implement yourself, because nobody else is going to do it for you. I've all my pharmacist friends who work in community at chains in particular, like, we already know what that is. Nobody is looking out for you in that space. Corporate heads they're not looking out for your individual well-being or your specific professional contributions. And so we have to think about yes, of course, there's a lot of systemic change that needs to happen, institutional change that needs to happen. But at the same time, how are we looking out for ourselves and making sure that we're taking ownership where we can? Yes, Shelly, I was right there with you. I was right there with you, Shelly, having to reevaluate and think about the things that were really salient to me because I couldn't do everything. I couldn't do everything that I usually did. So I definitely feel that. I think I mentioned earlier in this live, there are a couple of spots left in the health professionals to health writers cohort that's coming up in January. So if you might be interested in the cohort, just comment right under this video and we can definitely have a conversation about it. I think there are only 1 or 2 seats left, so there are not very many. I'm really excited for the group that we have so far. It's going to be wonderful. So I'm really excited about it. But yeah, I will be back tomorrow. Again, we're going to be talking about how your 6-figure pharmacist salary is not worth your sanity, which is it's going to be a tough conversation, but a conversation that I think is really important to have. So thank you so much for tuning in today, and I will catch you next time.